Let's talk about General Motors and how the ideas of William Durant and Alfred Sloan made this company the largest car manufacturer in the United States. It all started in 1904, when Durant headed the Buick Motor Company. Under his leadership, the company became the leading automobile manufacturer in the United States, and inspired by this success, Durant decided to create General Motors. Initially, the manufacturer Buick entered the composition of this newly created company, then Olds, Oakland, and Cadillac. And these companies themselves would determine the development of General Motors in the next few years. Of course, there were many more companies in the General Motors structure, but all the other companies were practically invisible and their contribution to development was insignificant. So, what was the point of leaving a bunch of different manufacturers in the General Motors structure, and why wouldn't it be easier to combine them together and integrate them into one company? That was Durant's idea, which, by the way, was quite revolutionary at that time. Because he understood that in the case of integrating two or more companies into one, then at the same time there was an integration of different structural divisions. And the problem with such integration was that each individual company that interested Durant at the time of acquisition could lose its uniqueness. This uniqueness was that each company had its own promising car models, its own innovations, each of which could determine the vector of development of the automotive industry for decades to come. And Durant simply wanted to preserve this uniqueness of each company. And in order to get his share of the profit in case of success, he came up with a business model like General Motors, where each individual company could count on financial support from the central company, but at the same time it retained a fairly high level of autonomy in making decisions. Of course, not all innovations were successful. For example, the idea of a friction transmission from Cadillac, which was an alternative to a gearbox, and the idea of a two-stroke engine from Elmore Manufacturing failed. However, this was precisely the logic. Bet on a bunch of different technologies and one of them was bound to work. However, despite the fact that Durant came up with and managed to implement a truly revolutionary idea, the company's rapid expansion would later lead to the fact that he would not be able to effectively manage the business and would lose control of it. The company first encountered problems in 1910. And although then, at the request of creditors, Durant was removed from management, he soon found another investor in the person of Pierre DuPont and regained control of the company. Nevertheless, despite the return of control, Durant did not know how and did not want to manage this diverse business. He liked building an empire more than managing it. Therefore, he preferred to search for new projects that could be added to the General Motors business. And how they would work and interact with other divisions, he was not interested in this. The only problem was that Durant was so carried away by expansion that soon most of his newly acquired assets generated only losses. And in 1920, the company faced a crisis of overproduction, when huge stocks of finished products and materials were formed in warehouses. And because of frozen funds, the company had a shortage of financial resources, and Durant himself did not know how to fix this problem. And of course, this situation did not please the investor Pierre DuPont, who by that time had become a key shareholder in the company. And perhaps the last straw that put an end to the DuPont's patience was that Durant became interested in playing on the stock exchange, using the company's money for this. After this incident, they decided to finally remove Durant from management, and instead of him, they put Alfred Sloan to manage the company. Sloan had previously managed one of the companies in the General Motors structure, and he got his position when, during a period of difficulties, he prepared a report on the state of the company in which he described the problems and proposals for their solution, and then showed this report to DuPont. And the problems were as follows. The first problem was that, thanks to Durant, a chaotic business structure was created, where no one understood which divisions were profitable and which were unprofitable. Because it often happened that due to internal corporate relations, the profit of one division could be eaten by other divisions. Alfred Sloan himself recalled that this happened as follows. When he headed the parts supplier United Motors, which was in the General Motors structure, his company was obliged to transfer its own products up the chain almost at cost. Because of this, his company could not show a profit. At the same time, the company that received this product then showed a profit in its financial statements, a part of which Sloan considered his own. Therefore, he insisted on reviewing this state of affairs in order to understand the effectiveness of each individual division. Also, due to the decentralized structure of the company, a situation arose when investments were distributed not on the basis of the real effectiveness of the divisions, but on how convincing the head of the structural division was. For example, the head of one such division believed that he had a breakthrough technology and the company should finance it. And this led to the fact that with limited resources in the company, other divisions that were more efficient did not receive these funds. And therefore, to solve this problem, he decided to develop an example of a clear and understandable organizational structure of the company, which the company did not have before. Now, each division was assigned clear functional responsibilities, its own sphere of authority. The status of the central company was also clearly defined, where the president managed all executive functions. And although the group companies did not lose their independence, now every decision had to be coordinated with the goals of the company itself and coordinated by the central company. The second problem was the product and pricing policy. And the problem was that the entire GM model range was very chaotic. In turn, this led to the fact that some of the company's models competed with each other in certain segments, taking away each other's market share. Another disadvantage of competition between the group's companies was the duplication of developments when different companies worked in parallel on the development of the same technologies. And so, Sloan decided to structure this model range. At first, car models with better prospects were highlighted, and competing models were abandoned, or a decision was made to change the segment. And then, a pricing policy was developed for this new product structure, where each segment had its own price. As Sloan wrote in his book, the production of cars in the middle and high price range was not a conscious choice. We simply did not know how to compete with Henry Ford. And although, in the first years after the implementation of this strategy, competition with Ford was a problem, in the long term this strategy paid off. Because the more the car market grew, the more unique the demands of buyers on them became. And GM was better prepared to cope with this change in consumer preferences. At the same time, Ford, which held the lion's share of the market due to a single product, began to lose market share due to its slow adaptability to changes. Sloan also understood the role of standardization for mass production. The problem was only how to simultaneously ensure a variety of models and individual options, and at the same time take full advantage of the advantages of mass production, for which standardization was necessary. And in order to achieve these completely opposite goals, Sloan came up with a simple, ingenious solution. If each car consists of certain components and parts, then in addition to the parts that make it unique, there are also parts that can be used in different models. And thus, General Motors established mass production of standardized for all car models, individual parts and components, such as pumps and batteries, which could not change for years. At the same time, the company annually updated the appearance of each car and introduced a huge number of options, such as automatic transmission, air conditioning, or radio, which could satisfy the whims of any consumer. And it was thanks to these key organizational innovations that General Motors overtook Ford and became the leader of the U.S. auto industry for many years.